So welcome to everyone to the series Speaking Up for Point Malate, in which invited speakers will address key questions and issues about Point Malate, and members of the public can ask questions. We honor the Ohlone people for whom this area is home and who were traditional stewards of this land. The Ohlone live among us now, and they merit our respect and acknowledgement of their presence, their culture, and their ancestors. The speaker will present for around 40 minutes and then will answer questions. Please limit your questions to 1 minute. We invite sincere questions asked with courtesy and respect. Inappropriate behavior will cause removal from the meeting. If you would like to raise more complex issues, please put them in the chat so that we can consider them for future sessions. Once we get started, I'll put the link for the Speaking Up YouTube channel into the chat in case you would like to see recordings of other sessions or the recording of this session. And next Monday, Mark J. Palmer, Associate Director of the International Marine Mammal Project's Earth Island Institute, will be speaking. The title of his talk is "The Last Whaling Station in the United States," which you may or may not know is immediately north of Point Malate. So I'm Sally Tobin, co-founder with Pam Stello of this speaker series. I'm a biologist and retiree of the Stanford Center for Biomedical Ethics. I work with the Point Malate Alliance and the Richmond Shoreline Alliance, and I'm a member of the Bay Area Sea Kayakers. I serve on the board of Citizens for East Shore Parks and live in Richmond. Pam Stello is co-chair of both the Point Malate Alliance and the Richmond Shoreline Alliance, and she serves on the board of Citizens for East Shore Parks. She lives in Richmond. Please wave, Pam. Our Zoom administrator is Danny Zacki, who is Bay and Shoreline organizer for the San Francisco Bay chapter of the Sierra Club. Please wave, Danny. And this week we are very, very pleased to present Dr. Naama Ras-Yassif, Community Engagement Manager for the Watershed Project. Naama worked as an environmental scientist with a focus on ecohydrology at the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and taught courses on the water cycle and water management at the University of California, Berkeley. As a monitoring and evaluation specialist and project manager for global development projects, she led participatory design projects with smallholder farmers, indigenous communities, and grassroots organizations in Alaska, Central America, and Africa. As a Richmond resident, Naama has co-led local environmental justice programs. She has a Bachelor of Science in Geology, a Master of Arts in Geomorphology, and her Ph.D. is in environmental science from the Weizmann Institute of Science in Israel. The title of her talk is Re-envisioning the San Francisco Bay Shoreline Using Nature-Based Solutions for Disadvantaged Communities. So here is Naama Ras-Yassif.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. And I'll start with sharing my screen. No, huh? You don't see it?
No.
Ah. Sorry. Let's try again. Wait a second. We did that once. Make it happen again. No. Okay. Bear with me 1 second.
Please.
Yeah, you see it now? No.
Not yet.
Yeah, you don't. All right. So now I will.
Of course, everything worked perfectly in the rehearsal.
Yeah, well, you know, we're all so used to. Where is it? Yep. I don't see it now again. I'll close the presentation and I'll try to open it again.
Yeah.
Bear with me. One more second. All right. It better work this time. That is so weird. It says your screen sharing is paused. Why is it paused?
Naama, if you want to email it to me,
Yes, I'm sorry about that.
no
Really
worries.
sorry.
I'm going to
I-
send you my email. Give us 1 second here.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, folks. All right, Danny, thank you. I got it. I should have sent it to you before.
No worries. In the meantime, I just want to point out that I did put in the chat a cleanup opportunity this weekend at Point Melody. So in the meantime, if anyone wants to go register for that, it's in the chat.
Okay, let us try that again until it reaches you. That is such a bummer. No? It says your screen is paused. Is it something on your side? No, let me try that once more. My God, that's horrible. I have such a nice presentation.
Okay, I just got it, so I
Oh.
can share these. Give me 1 second here.
I don't understand that. That never happened to me. I had so many glitches when I gave a talk. That never.
Okay.
Danny will take care of you.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
folks.
Appreciate that.
Okay. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yep.
All
Cool.
right. So thank you, Danny. We'll ground once more and start. Okay, let's go. Next one, please. All right, so I'll do that a bit quicker now, but you gave a wonderful introduction of myself, but we haven't spoken at all about the Watershed Project, which the organization I work for at the moment, and this is the project coming out of the Watershed Project. I want to speak a bit about the North Richmond history, and then sea level rise, specifically in North Richmond, then introduce our project for the shoreline adaptation, speak about community engagement, and I want to acknowledge that two of the community representatives that we worked with on this project and are continuing to work with are usuals in your speaker series. This is Alix and Chip, and I invited them to speak at the end of the presentation and provide some input from their perspective and ask questions or answer any of your questions. And then I'll speak a bit about the next step of this project. Next one, please. Thank you. So the Watershed Project is a Richmond-based nonprofit. Last June, we celebrated 25 years. That's a lot of time. And over the year, the focus has changed. Originally, the organization worked to enhance the connection of people to their watersheds, with the understanding that if people are more connected to their watershed, then they'll be more prone to support or even actively take part in protecting and restoring our watersheds. In the beginning, most of the work was focused on education. Now we do much more on the side of capacity building, especially community building and activism. So some of the projects we worked on over the years, there's a lot of K-12 watershed education. We do a lot of education around urban greening and green infrastructure, including for the shorelines. There's a really interesting project not far from Point Pinole, where we introduce some barriers to sea level rise that will also increase growth of natural habitat. We do a lot of stream cleaning activities, trash removal. We have a Green Color Corp that happened several years ago, and a new one is starting very soon. So if you know any local youth that would like to be part of that, that's a workforce development project, then please send them our way. And then we do a lot of community building, capacity building projects like the one I'm going to tell you about today. Thank you. Next slide, please. All right. So how do we fit inside this project? Because this is a design project, and the Watershed Project is a community-based organization. So the project works on a fund received by Brit. If you're familiar with that, there's a small photo showing all the icons, BCDC, one of the things we just talked about. So this is a really small grant. This is, well, small. It's about not much more than 600,000, which is specifically to start thinking of what we want to do with the North Richmond shoreline. The grantee is West County Wastewater. They're a strong stakeholder. You'll understand why in a second. Mithun is the company we work with. They are the architectural designers. ESA is the landscape engineers, and we, the Water Project, do the community engagement component of this project. Next photo, please. This all started by the Resilience by Design competition. If some of you, I'm sure that some of you are familiar with that. This competition, Mithun with the Watershed Project and other community residents started to think about the North Richmond shoreline, and it was one of the projects that won this competition in 2018. And as a result of that, with strong enhancement of Supervisor John Joya, we started holding regular stakeholders meeting. Stakeholders is any person that has an interest in the North Richmond shoreline. So that includes East Bay Parks, Republic Services, West County Wastewater Facility, EB-MUD, the county, of course, and different private landowners and community representatives. And so these were usually monthly meetings. And after some time, we decided to apply for this grant and start literally working on a long-term plan to help the North Richmond shoreline and all its assets be more sustainable to sea level rise. Next slide, please. Thank you. When I started to speak with Pam about giving this talk, she asked me, well, how is it related to Point Mulati. And that's why I thought to bring this slide. If you're not familiar with this, I'm sure some of you are, but those who are not, I highly recommend looking at this resource. It was created by SFEI, San Francisco Estuary Institute, and what they did is they divided the San Francisco Bay shoreline to what they call operational landscape units, or OLUS, in their adaptation atlas. And we are Point Mulate's neighbors, right? So if you look at the map on the right, this is the North Richmond shoreline. It stretches between Point Pinole and Point San Pablo, very close to Point Mulate. So I think it's really relevant to understand how we're working to reduce the impact of sea level rise. Next one, please. All right, a few words about North Richmond. I really don't know how many of you are familiar with the neighborhood or not familiar, but I do want to explain the context a bit. North Richmond is nested between areas that are part of Richmond, San Pablo, and Contra Costa, but North Richmond is an unincorporated community, which means that it gets little support and little budget for any development project. It's a disadvantaged community, majority Black and Latinx population. They suffer from low income, high homelessness, low quality education, a lot of trash and illegal dumping, and of course a lot of pollution. So not only they're the closest community to the Chevron facility, but they're also close to the harbor. They're close to railroads that pass coal through the neighborhood. North Richmond has one of the highest percentage of children with asthma in California. Andrea Soto, which spoke here, I think 2 weeks ago, is familiar for his toxic tours, and he speaks on how the distance between North Richmond and Berkeley is 10 kilometers, and that's the same number of difference in years when you talk about life expectancy, expectancy, right? So thank you. So yeah, 10 years different. 1 year per kilometer. That's a lot. Next one, please. The history of North Richmond is really interesting. So in the 30s, 40s, 50s, when the area started to evolve around heavy industry, the shipyard, the Chevron refinery, which is now 100, I think a bit more than 100 years old, the railroad, there were a lot of highly polluting industries that needed a lot of cheap workforce, and they brought people from the US South and Midwest that came in high numbers. There was no place to accommodate them, so North Richmond was built very quickly with no time for planning. So very narrow streets, almost no infrastructure, no boardwalk, no place for trees that beautify the neighborhood or now make it more livable during heat waves. A lot of flooding issues. There's two streams that incise the neighborhood, the Wildcat Creek and San Pablo Creek. Both of them flood during high storms, and of course the proximity to the shoreline. Next one, please. And with that, there's a lot of environmental justice work in the neighborhood. On the photo on the left shows Reverend Dotson, to commemorate him, the Dotson Family Marsh is named, and he started all the activism to restore that area and save it from one of the things that they wanted to build on it. It is a small Air Force, I think, something like that. I don't remember exactly, but yeah. So, and then there's a lot of work to restore the creeks. This is the one in the middle is in San Pablo Creek. And then the county and with contribution from us did a lot of work around investigating the needs of the community, right? So conducting needs assessment and creating documents like the North Richmond Quality of Life report, and looking at how to make the area more resilient. And the North Richmond Shoreline Vision, which this project is part of. Next one, please. Okay, so just to move us from the history to today, I just wanted to add this map as well. On the left, you see the historic condition of the habitat before industrialization happened, and on the right you see the current situation, and you see that a lot of the land has been filled in order to produce space for industry, right? So with that in mind, I think it'll be easier to understand how vulnerable this area is to sea level rise, because it's you know, it's a landfill. Most of it is a landfill, literally, and what the natural ecosystem we want to do is restore itself into the low-lying tidal marshes and wetlands. Next one, please. All right, so I know you all heard a lot about sea level rise, but I always like to show this aerial photo that shows how vulnerable our area is to sea level rise, because it's highly urbanized, it's very dense, and it's just low-lying, right? So it'll be one of the first areas to be flooded. Some of the implications to sea level rise is, first and foremost, loss of land, but there will also be damage to properties that are higher on the hills during you know, on farther away areas during high tide and severe storms. Of course, during those periods there's transportation issues, all the main highways and railroads that will be damaged. And in many areas in the world, this is not unique to us, but a lot of wastewater facilities were built next to the shoreline, which is the lowest place, in order to reduce cost and energy from pumping. So having wastewater just flow into the lower areas. And many of the wastewater facilities around the world are one of the first to be impacted by sea level rise. And in the North Richmond shoreline, the West County Wastewater Facility, you know, they serve over 100,000 people in the area. And talking with them, they say that they already observe a reduced capacity to treat water, because a lot of time they have to deal with water that is coming from the bay and pushing the wastewater up. And you know, it's you know, even if I don't think of being impacted personally because of where we live by sea level rise, our bathrooms will be. So you know, the scenario is that during those high water level days, then wastewater will be backed up into our houses. And then, of course, there's issues of contamination because sea level rise is, and I'm sure you know, if you've been listening to these series, you know about that with sea level rise, there's groundwater level rise, and the soils in North Richmond especially, but all around the bay, a lot of them are contaminated. There's quite a lot of super sites, but there's also just areas where the soil is contaminated, and we anticipate that water will reach the air, will reach the water systems, will reach our watersheds, and that is a major concern. Please, next one, please. Thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a series of maps that show the current scenarios or predictions or for sea level rise in the North Richmond shoreline. So again, just so you see it, on the left is the Chevron facility. On the top right is Point Pinole, or more specifically, the Dodson Family Marsh. You see the West County wastewater in the middle, and then the landfill is, if you've been in that area, it's kind of a mountain that is man-made by the Republic Services with all our trash. If you can just slowly go through them. So this is the current mean high water. So we're talking about high water. This is during high storms, during strong storms. So this is current sea level. Next one, please. Okay, so this is expected to be by 2030 during strong storms, 5-year storms event. Sea level will rise in 36 inch, and this is the area that will be flooded. Next one. By 2050, we're anticipating a 52-inch sea level rise. Next one. 2070, next one. I think that's the last one. So is that the last one? I think so. Yeah. So by the end of the century, we're anticipating a 84-inch sea level rise, and all these areas, including the North Richmond neighborhood, will be flooded during high tide or large storm events. Next one, please. So here we're starting to go into the details of the project itself. The idea with this project is that we'll try to find a solution to the sea level rise and kind of hug the North Richmond shoreline and protect the whole area. So from the Dodson Creek, around the landfill, up to Chevron, and understand what we can do in order to hold the water back. Next one, please. The project has two different levels, or two different components. The first component looks to create a concept design, or what we call a 30% concept design. So this is just starting to understand what we want to do around the study area. And this is the area that's going to be flooded by the end of the century. Next one. The second part creates a more developed plan for the West County wastewater facility, because they are the grantees and they're so vulnerable to sea level rise. The idea was to start with a pilot area that will protect the West County wastewater, and if that works, then continue that along the whole 5.5 mile stretch. The 5.5 mile is a lot, so we need to start with something. Next one, please. The project has three main guiding principles. The first one is to have a wise stakeholder involvement, with the notion that if we work together, we have a better chance of producing a more efficient solution to sea level rise that will be, first of all, cheaper, but also, just more efficient in holding the water back, because it will be regional. And what you see here is mapping of the stakeholders. There's two groups. There's Chevron and all the rest. The reason why there's Chevron and all the rest is Chevron is not only the largest landowner in the North Richmond shoreline, but also it's the only one that is not collaborative. If you remember, I told you that we had those stakeholders meetings since 2019, and Chevron had a representative sitting in these meetings. But once we received the grant, they stepped away. Maybe they do have a representative, but they're not transparent with that. The reason they stepped away is because their lawyers recommended them to do that. Next one, please. The second guiding principle is to use what we call a multi-benefit approach. And the idea behind it is this: if we're already going to build some structure to protect the shoreline, then we will use this opportunity to provide other amenities and facilities for the community, especially the disadvantaged community in North Richmond, but also communities that live around the area with enlarging circles. We can all benefit from that. So, we're thinking about boardwalk, community centers, trails, bicycle trails, small shops. We even thought that maybe a beach, but that's not an option at the moment. Next one. And the third guiding principles, and I'll try to rush this, and the third guiding principle is to use nature-based solution. So what you see on the left is a horizontal, so the solution the term we use is a horizontal levee, and a horizontal levee is just what it sounds like. So instead of being very, very tall, it's going to be mostly horizontal, but it will hold the water away. And what you see on the left is a horizontal levee that is protecting a wastewater facility in the South Bay. This is called the Oroloma horizontal levee. On the right, probably most of you recognize this. This is a seawall in the San Francisco Embarcadero, and you can immediately see the differences. The seawall is the solution that was used many, many years ago. It's highly technical. It needs to be maintained quite often. The problems with it is, first of all, of course, it keeps people away. You don't have access to the shoreline at all, but also it can deal only with a certain height of sea level rise, where the solution on the left, which is nature-based, what it does, it uses the forces of the natural ecosystem in order to deal with the issue of sea level rise, because we have this substrate that is very permeable. It can take in a lot of water, especially with native plants. It can take the wave action. It can hold, the physical impact of the wave action. And of course, it increases the access of community members to the area. Next one, please. All right, so this is what a horizontal levee looks like. So the idea is that toward the sea, what you do is you fill in all this green area is a filling, sediments that will be put inside. But all the slope that is looking toward the ocean tries to mimic the natural environment, and all the slope that is looking toward the other side actually produces areas for community amenities, right? So such as trail improvements, community centers, all those things that I mentioned. Next one. Okay, so we're talking about a horizontal levee, and this is only for a pilot area that I showed you next to the Waste Country wastewater facility. We're talking about a horizontal levee, but what will this look like? There can be different heights. The different heights mean different costs. Because it means different amounts of sediment. And it also, there's a lot of amenities that you can put in. There's a lot of points of access to this project. There's many, many design questions. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to bring the community in to take part in this process and help the designers decide on all these really important design questions. Next one, please. Okay, so the Watershed Project was called in order to do what, in the original plan, it was called to do community engagement. So we were asked to first and foremost do outreach, and then to educate people about the impacts of sea level rise to the North Richmond shoreline, and then gather community voices. But what we did is we decided to do more than that. Next one, please. So what we wanted to do is, instead of community engagement, we wanted to do we wanted to create an opportunity for community members to take part in the decision-making process. So instead of outreach, what we did is recruitment. We did create kind of an educational presentation, and we ran with that in many settings, neighborhood settings, different seminars, and we called people to come work with us. And so we did recruit community members, and then instead of education, these community members worked with us. And then instead of gathering community voices, what we did is we provided an opportunity for community members, again, to co-lead research and design with the designers and the engineers. Next one. What did this look like? We We recruited about 20 community members. We had weekly meetings. These were paid meetings. How do you have community members sit at the table with the designers and engineers? We went first of all through a learning phase where community members learned about the natural ecosystems, about nature-based solutions, about the process of designing such a large-scale project, about environmental activism in Richmond, etc., etc. And then we started to work. We divided into 3 work groups. Next one, please. The first work group, and you can see some of the participants on the left, the first work group was called Envisioning Design Approaches. In this work group, community members sat with the designers and engineers. One important note I forgot to make is that we intentionally wanted these groups to be small, so community members can really be active. When you have a large group, then most of the people don't talk, and then some people are active, and we wanted everyone to be at the front. So they met in the beginning once a week, and then once every 2 weeks, and they explored solutions, like literal. This is how designers and engineers work. They draw on the map, and I forgot to mention also that we had I think 3 site visits with the community members. Next one, please. The second group was the Sustainability and Growth group, and they explored what mutual benefits we can think of, what other development opportunities there are, how can we link this project to things like employment and housing and education. Next one. And the last work group worked on the community survey. So again, like I said, instead of just gathering community voices, it was clear that we need to gather more voices than the 20 community members that work with us. So what we did is that group, they literally designed a survey, and they selected community members they want to sample, or they want to gather information from, and they met with those people and led focus group discussion on questions that were designed together. Next one. So these are some examples of questions that were in that community survey that we co-designed. We asked them how they use the shoreline, what do they like about the shoreline, what they don't like about the shoreline, what other amenities they would like to see. Next one. And then a big component of that were looking at the map and trying to think of access points. Where would we want to access the shoreline? How will it connect to the neighborhood? Because the idea is that, community members, they understand how they use this area the best. And we received a lot of really, really good ideas. Next one. All right, so before I move, I think that we can stop with the presentation. Maybe I'll just tell you about the next phase, and I can tell that by heart. So we still have 3 more meetings with the community members, and then we are applying for additional grants to start to create more advanced designs for the project, which will also include high participation of community members. Thank you. I'm sorry if I rushed that toward the end, because I'm just looking at my time, and I know that we started late, so I rushed through it. I'm sorry if that was too quick, but also I would really like to have Chip and Alix speak if you'd like to. I'm inviting you to speak.
Okay, Chip or Alix?
Go ahead, Alix.
Yeah, no. So Alix won't, maybe will be able to respond to questions. But Chip, if you would want to say something, then you.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Chip Gribble, and I live in the Richmond Annex. I thought it was a fascinating experience, and the one interesting part is the ability to get community input when you engage them in the way that this group did in terms of the outreach process. That was fascinating, and the whole concept of community engagement just continues to evolve in a more meaningful way over time. I certainly saw this with this group. The other thought that came to my mind through this exercise was, or my participation was, I think that Richmond, the city of Richmond, the municipal area of Richmond, which includes an incredible length of shoreline, should come up with its own site-specific or specific plan for shoreline redevelopment. And that doesn't mean buildings, but it could include living levees, promenades, recreation, whatever, in a community, again, in a meaningful community input way, and certainly recognizing and trying to address climate change and the need for resilience and adaptation. And so I see a much larger need for the city to go forward with a similar kind of approach, holistic approach. Anyway, it was really a pleasure to be involved in this, and thank you.
Alex, did you have something to add? Okay, all right. So thank you, Naama, and thank you, Chip. And Pam is handling the question and answer period today. So Pam.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sally, and thank you, Naama. If you have a question, please raise your electronic hand. If you're on the phone, you can mute and unmute by toggling 6, or raise or lower your hand by toggling 9. I'll call on speakers and I'll check the chat for additional questions. And as well, if you're recognized to speak, you'll receive a pop-up on your screen and you can just click unmute. David Kafton.
Oh, hello. I live in Marina Bay, and thank you very much for such an informative presentation. I'm really new to the North Richmond area. I noticed on the map that there's, and in reading a little bit, that's about 3,700 people who live in North Richmond, if I'm not mistaken, and they live in a fairly confined area well away from the shore, it looks like, with open space to the west, and they live primarily between Richmond Parkway and the railroad to the east, and from Chesley to Wildcat Creek, and that's it. So then you have a situation where you have to protect them from sea level rise, and then there's everything else like the infrastructure of the wastewater plant and other industrial sites out there. And I'm unfamiliar with how many, but I look at the satellite view and you've got a lot of places out there. So I'm just wondering how the human element, gets into this. And out there, there's sea level rise. And I was wondering if there's a concern about toxic load out there, because you've had the refinery and other things, and if there's been any measurements or testing out there to see before you go and do something. That's about it.
Danny, should I respond?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Danny, I didn't say thank you for progressing the slides and helping me out with that caveat. So David, thank you. That's an excellent question. So out of it, let me try to respond. So first of all, regarding the neighborhood being far away from the shoreline, you're right, but please remember that this is a very flat area, low-lying. Remember, it was a lot of it was just filled in order to the tidal marsh in order to provide more land for industry. So when sea level will rise, the west part of the neighborhood will be flooded. And as you said, there's 2 creeks flowing through the neighborhood, and they will be back flooded, right? So when sea level rises, they will be filled with seawater salt water, and then they will probably flood the neighborhood as well. But definitely the project is aimed toward securing those houses, but there's not a lot of houses that probably will be flooded, and more so keeping the water away from the other, the industry. So, the West County wastewater is not an industry, it's serving us, right? So that has a high importance. The transportation routes have a high importance. The railway have a high importance, and the wetland itself. So I think I didn't have time to really mention that because we specifically decided to work on nature-based solution, the ecosystem itself has a profound importance as well.
Great.
As for pollution, yes. Yeah, I'm not familiar. Probably I see that Janet is on this call. Maybe she has some more information on measurements, but for sure, I mean, the rich, the Chevron, the reason they don't want to be part of this is because they don't want us to go in and see what's happening there. There's a century long of that place is a graveyard. So yeah.
Thank you. Kelly Hammergren?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. One I put in the chat about if you're doing this, adding the sediment, how do you ensure that that sediment isn't contaminated? And then by adding this sediment, I mean, you're kind of changing those ecosystems, and how, again, how is that going to protect the ecosystems that are there? And of course, this is over the long haul, and I'm still concerned about how much sea level rise we're actually going to get with the threat of the 𝗏𝗏𝗏 glacier nearing collapse in Antarctica. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Yeah. So Kelly, that those sediments are a hot topic now, like, because everyone wants those sediments for, as a filling. And actually the EPA is going to have a whole workshop, or I think it's a 2-day workshop they're planning for December, specifically on that topic. There's a lot of dredging material that is currently dredged from the bay and removed into the ocean. And that's, that's not very helpful. So there's currently no policy that allows a development project like this one to use the dredging material, even though it's local. Definitely any sediment material that will go into filling or creating that levee will have to go through, expansive CEQA or, environmental hazard evaluation testing. And as to the efficiency, it'll definitely be more efficient if it'll be regional, right? If we'll have collaborations with all the stakeholders, or all the landowners, and especially the largest landowner, which is Chevron. So, if you protect the West County wastewater by hugging it, but a lot of water will come through Chevron and through the polluted Chevron area, then that is definitely an issue.
Is there an additional question? Thank you, Naama.
I have a question, if that's okay. Yeah. One of the things that I was thinking about in your presentation, which Naama, thank you so much for, is, a lot of the times in my work, we're trying to identify what areas would be good candidates for like a living levee and nature-based solutions. And I'm wondering if you could talk about like how those areas could be identified, or how it was identified in this case.
How was the North Richmond shoreline identified?
As being a good candidate for a living levee.
Yeah. Uh, that's not an easy question. And the reason is that, we can't guarantee that it's a good solution. We absolutely understand that there needs to be a serious effort to protect the North Richmond shoreline, again because it's so low lying, and it has these these structures that are critical to the functioning of the area. And if there is going to be a solution put in place, then us, the group that worked on the grant, had no, it was sure that we wanted to work on a nature-based solution, and lucky for us, the whole kind of field is shifting into that. So it's easy to have people on our side, understanding that a solution to sea level rise should not look like a seawall, but it needs to be something that restores the natural habitat and provides amenities to local community, especially if they're disadvantaged communities. And so I think that it's not that it was identified as such, but rather the people that started to work on the grant identified their wanting to work on such a solution, and it was granted. But again, I want you to understand that this is a huge project. It's a long-term project. So we only did the 30% design currently, and we're working toward a grant to finish the 60% design, but that doesn't even include the 𝐶EQA, and after that we'll have to go through the 𝐶EQA, and then we'll have to go through permitting and understanding where to bring all the sedimentation, and then the implementation component, so the building, the shifting of the sediments from side to side will take several years as well. So this is probably, we're looking at a decade and millions of dollars, if not milliards of, so it has not been approved yet, but that's the direction, definitely the direction we're pushing toward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sally?
I was just wondering, what is the future of the landfill? What does that look like? I mean, right now it sort of towers above everything. And I'm thinking that there must be some sort of limit to the height it can achieve before we need oxygen to get to the top. So I'm just sort of wondering about where that's going.
Yeah, thank you. And Pam, I think you're monitoring the questions, but I see some interesting questions in the chat as well, which I'll be happy to reply to. So the landfill, they don't put trash there anymore. They use it only for green materials, so for compost. So they bring the compost tracks there, all our green material, and they differentiate it there, and then they leave what they can leave and they take what they can take. So it's not going to be much higher than that. But I do want to say that if y'all didn't do the landfill loop, then go outside and do it, because it's really special. It's one of the last kind of wild areas, untouched areas in our part of the bay, and it's really special.
Thank you. I'm going to read Debbie's question from the chat, and then I'll go back. There's a couple other hands raised. Is Parchester Village, which is part of Richmond, in a similar situation as far as flooding? And in addition, what does 30% design mean?
Yes, so Parchester Village is, and we also sampled their MAC. So we talked with the Parchester Village MAC in order to get their input. So yes, they're part of this project. So North Richmond, including Parchester Village and the Shields Reed neighborhood, all of that. So that's that to that. 30% design, that's a really good question. That's something I had to educate myself as well as all our community members. So when you do such a large scale landscape design project, you don't started, it's like when you want to plan a house, so you sit with a client and start to think, okay, what do you want? I want 3 bedrooms, I want 1 kitchen. That's the 30% design, what's inside the house. Then you go and you make more specific design programs, and then you go to a situation where you have sketches that a constructor can take and start building. So that's the 100% design. So there's a lot of process going through that for such large projects.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna Ellen Barth, and then I'll go back to Kelly Hammergren. Thank you.
Hi, I wonder, when did engineers get into this, and water flow and the suitability of this area for horizontal levee, which totally endorsed, but suppose Chevron decides to put up big walls and that's going to affect water flow, and how do all those things get sorted out along with the money? Because for horizontal levee, with people making choices of bike lanes or how high and long it will be, there seem to be so many variables in here that are basic, that have to do with engineering and money, that I don't think your group is handling them at all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the group is not us, the Watershed Project. Actually, most of the work is done with by the architectural designers and the industrial engineers, and they already did some preliminary soil tests to understand the substrate. So all, in order to understand if we can put a horizontal levee up there or not. So there are some measurements, but once it proceeds, there'll be many, many more. But there has been some surveys that have already been done. So I don't think there's a lot of unknowns about that. I don't think there's a lot of unknowns about sea level rise, like what areas will be flooded. That's a given science, we know that. A lot of unknowns are actually with Chevron. You're right about that, Ellen, because we don't know what their plans are. We don't.
Thank you. Kelly, do you want to ask your question? This will be the final question.
Yes, a number of us here have heard Christina Hill talk about groundwater with sea level rise, and how will the horizontal levee fit with rising groundwater, because that sea level will push up the groundwater.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. I'm familiar with Christina's work, and I don't have an answer for that yet, but definitely it will be weaved into the design and taken into consideration. But I don't have an answer for that yet.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Naama. That was an excellent, really inspiring and interesting presentation, and so much information. Thank you. Sally?
And thank you, Naama, for letting us have really something we don't often get, which is a look at a project while it's in its messy planning stages.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just really fabulous for us to see what that looks like. So thank you to everyone for joining us. Please come next week for another exciting presentation in the Speaking Up for Point Malate series. As I mentioned earlier, next week will be a presentation about the last whaling station, and the week after that is Labor Day, so we will skip that day. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.